So what state was the case, and whoever can take this, Tom, if you want to take this, what state was the case in when it was handed to you? Because a lot of people don't know, but you were handed this case in September of last year, right?
Right.
Okay.
It really was far different than the end product. The state's witness list was 85, and I'm not really sure what the state's theory was to win the case at that time. But after a few weeks, it became readily apparent that a traditional murder case analysis was not going to work. That was kind of the opinion I formed when it was first run by me, but that was definitely when it was our responsibility. And Dominic and Jimmy had assigned Ashley to the case. So she was involved, or not involved, but assigned when I got there. And you talk about a blessing. It worked. But we totally changed the approach to the case between all of us.
Can you, who were some of the witnesses that I guess were on the initial list? Was it more like family and friends? Was it more like doctors? Like, how did you go about dwindling it down to, I think, 20 or so?
To be honest with you, I didn't count the last time. I mean, it couldn't be.
In the teens somewhere.
Yeah, it was in the teens somewhere. There were a bunch of doctors, and there was really nothing to be gained by calling them. And there were more Ponzi scheme victims, and there was not much to be gained by them either. A big breakthrough time-wise was when the defense stipulated to two things: chain of custody of the physical evidence, and that was a monumental time saver, and it would have accomplished nothing.
What do you mean by that? For those who don't know?
Normally, the state would be required to produce witnesses of everybody who touched any of the physical evidence in the case. Well, this stuff went from one federal agent to a state agent to another federal agent to Quantico, Virginia, back, and it would have been just tedious, unnecessary stuff. So to the defense credit, they stipulate, once we took a few hours and went over every detail with them, and again, to their credit, they stipulated to all of that. And the other stipulation that they made, chain of custody and
authenticity of the medical records.
Right. We did not have to produce record keepers for any documentation, which that was another, I mean, it's an anachronistic part of the law that you still do some of this stuff. There's really no reason to doubt the authenticity of a lot of the evidence, but to say you have to bring some person who has no idea other than to say, my job is to keep this record. And that was it. And they stipulated to that too.
Interesting. So I got to apologize too. I was critical on, and I'd like to talk about an overview of your all's approach. I was a little worried early on for the lack of objections on the state's part. And I know nothing. I dropped out of college. Like, I'm not a lawyer in any sense of the word, but I just was thinking like, well, a lot of these things, that are being said, I think we could object to because, I thought Victor was just implying that Humalog wouldn't have been possible to kill Michael Cochran, and there was different things. But my apology comes in that I think by the end, the difference in the approach between your all's approach to the case and the defense's approach was so far apart from each other that it really separated you all and made the narrative that Ashley ended up presenting on the close that much clearer, if that makes sense. Was that a goal of yours to kind of let the jury decide a lot of these things, or not to throw mud in it, or not to confuse anyone, or what was?
I think a couple things. There are expectations primarily from movies and TV where the lawyers come right out of central casting and make objections to all sorts of things. Probably decades ago, I decided if this testimony is not hurting my case, I don't care if I could make an objection or not. I'm going to let it go. And if it's actually helping me, I'm absolutely going to let it go. And that was true in both cases. Now, Ashley's going to have to find her own way on this. How is she going to go about that? But that was pretty much my approach and has been for a long time.
Well, that's great. So, so you ultimately decide if you're going to object. It's not like, well, Ashley can throw up an objection. It's kind of the prosecutor, the lead prosecutor kind of.
No, I'm not saying that. In fact, we divided up the witnesses on a fairly even basis. So if it was Ashley's witness or it was Ashley to cross their witness, that was her, whatever way Ashley wanted to do it was fine. I'm just giving you my
gotcha. That's
my approach.
Well, that makes sense because at the end I was like, well, this is where experience comes in because, you know, I'm an idiot and the separation between you and the defense was just so clear to me. I was like, oh, well, and then, but in turn, when you object, it's taken more seriously because it didn't happen nearly as much as the defense. But I talked to a friend who's a lawyer, and he said, well, basically it works like this. If it's the law, if you're a defense lawyer, if it's the law, you pound the law. If it's the truth, you pound the truth. And if it's something else, you pound the table. And he said there was a lot of pounding the table going on. So I think the jury saw right through that, which we interviewed them. And, you know, it basically was apparent that it didn't work out to throw all those smoke and mirrors in a lot of these things.
What's kind of like, so obviously some of the objections were somewhat funny, especially from Stanley. Because obviously we saw that like Stanley was doing all the medical witnesses. And I remember, you know, the defense had tried multiple times to get that vial of insulin thrown out. And then when it's about to be presented, he immediately objects. And you're just like, really? Like, we haven't gotten there yet. The judge is like, calm down. But like, so like, I don't know. Is it weird to like not throw humor into it, but just kind of like show the jury that like you're not as worried about the defense or that like, you know, you think they're a little bit absurd or how to, you know?
Well, you've covered a lot of ground. But there was a comment made to Stanley on one of his objections, and that was unprofessional. I shouldn't have done that. But it was one of those, you really, at some point, you just can't believe this is your objection at this time. But it was, and it got overruled, and we rolled on down the tracks.
That was towards the end, right?
It was in the medical part.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Or just, it was actually the FBI, one guy.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Well, I think y'all held the professionalism really well because I was unglued in my house just throwing stuff. I'm like, what are we doing? You know,